Welcome to another episode of the Chicks on the Right show. We are so super stoked to have Senator Rand Paul back with us. It's been way too long. You guys know him as the senator from Kentucky with the great hair who puts out the annual Festivus report outlining all the government waste. And now he is the chair of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, which is very exciting. We're loving that you're in a position to focus on censorship and COVID. So we want to know what your primary objectives and goals are for the committee, and how much is Fauci being in jail one of them?
You know, we'd like to recreate the committee as an oversight committee, which means we go after the executive branch. We uncover what they're doing with our money. We uncover wasteful spending. There's still a lot we don't know about COVID. For example, we know that the U.S. government funded research in Wuhan. We think that research led to the pandemic. We don't know how the funding got approved, though. In 2014, there was a moratorium on gain-of-function research, this research that puts together two viruses and makes them more dangerous by putting them together. There was a moratorium from 2014 to 2016. When they started the flow of money again, though, they created a safety committee called the P3CO committee. This committee is where dangerous research would go to be analyzed to make sure it was safe before we funded it. Well, the research in Wuhan never went there. We've discovered that there were meetings to discuss this, but then the decision was made that it wouldn't go to the safety committee. But they won't release the details. They won't release the discussion. They won't release who is part of the meeting. And we've been going at this for 3 years. This is NIH. We're going to get it. We're going to have a cooperative administration. Jay Bhattacharya is a scientist, an MD and a PhD from Stanford, who's been a leader in advocating for transparency. He's going to be head of NIH. I've spoken with him. I've also spoken with Robert Kennedy, who will be his boss if he's confirmed at HHS. They are both for more transparency on everything. In addition, we're going to send them a little legal reminder that they can use with their career servants, and that's a subpoena. The reason we're sending them as a subpoena is that not that we don't think that they'll react, we actually think they'll be helpful. But our fear is that there actually will still be career people at NIH and HHS who will try to hide the ball and will basically try to defy what they are told to do. I think a legal subpoena is a little bit of a reminder that if they do so, it's against the law and there can be legal ramifications. But we think there's still some significant information to find out on this front. We also have legislation to try to fix this. Instead of just having this committee that may or may not look at dangerous research, we have a bill called the Risky Research Review Act, and this would be a presidential impaneled commission of scientists who would have the ability to look at all grants throughout all of government, look at the dangerous ones, bring them before for special review, and would have the ability to stop funding them. So this would be basically a veto power on dangerous research, and we have bipartisan support for it. We got it out of committee last year, but not to the full floor. Our hope is to get that to the full floor. But in general, what we'd like to do is take the committee and look at how your money's being spent, look for waste, fraud, and abuse, and basically use the ability of the committee to issue subpoenas to go after that record and make the executive branch produce these records.
You've been fighting for this for years. Like I would imagine, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but you've got to feel a little bit better just knowing that this administration is going to be taking the helm. Like you could at least move forward a little bit, because I feel like we talked to you, a couple of years ago, and I just feel like this is something that you've been fighting for forever for the American people to try to get answers about this stuff. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing is I can show you two documents that are 250 pages long where everything's redacted. And this is from the HHS. This isn't the CIA. This is Health and Human Services redacting large portion of records because they're hiding something. So we are going to get to the bottom of this. We also think, though, that there is bioweapons research in our own government, in the intel community, that needs to be exposed, or at the very least needs oversight from public officials. So if I'm not allowed to see it, that means nobody's looking at it, nobody in the public, nobody in Congress. So we need oversight of our bioweapons projects as well. So this new committee would oversee everything, classified, unclassified. And for example, let's say Ebola. Ebola kills 50% of people. And let's say someone in the intel community says, oh, well, the Chinese are trying to aerosolize it, meaning spread through the air. Well, maybe we should do that. Well, maybe we should have a discussion of that because
Yeah.
aerosolizing it, if it leaks from a lab, could kill 50% of the world's population. We're talking about a devastation beyond the Black Plague, beyond the plagues of the Middle Ages. So we're talking about something so horrendous that could really even have the potential of wiping out mankind. Certainly, there ought to be a little bit of a public discussion of what we're doing, even in the classified section. So we're pushing hard on this. You're right. The Trump administration has appointed good people, even on the intel side. This is why I love someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who has a healthy disrespect for too much power concentrated in secret to abuse people's civil liberties. In fact, the current TSA went after her and put her on a list. I mean, what kind of government it is that a former congresswoman is put on a list to have people flying on the plane with her because of her political views?
Yeah.
That is outrageous.
It's
And the
an out
people
of
who do
control.
that should go to jail.
So how confident, because people are asking, they want us to ask you, how confident at all do you feel about there being accountability for Anthony Fauci, who of course everybody is so mad at in conservative circles, and rightly so, because it just seems like he's skated off into retirement, he's loving his life, he's got all the Secret Service, whatever, and we're just like, wait, so that's it?
We get to pay his pension? It seems like not very fair.
Well, it's worse than that. It's not just his pension. We are spending $15 million a year providing a limousine, a driver, and 24-hour security to Anthony Fauci. Meanwhile, he made more money than the president. He's being treated as a former president. The one thing I think will end pretty close, hopefully to day one, is that's going to end. They say he got death threats. Well, so have I. I've had periods of time where we've had more than 30 death threats in a month. So the thing is, it's not good. I don't want anybody to have death threats, but he doesn't deserve the same kind of protection that a former president gets.
Right.
And I don't think his death threats or any of that has been out of the ordinary to most public officials. And but he shouldn't be getting a limo sent to his house every day. That is insane.
God.
But when he was in office, he was making over $450,000 a year. His wife was making over $250,000. She was the ethics counselor over at the NIH. And so, can you imagine? Can you imagine? But yeah, that's got to end. And he did lie to Congress. I will refer him again for prosecution to the new attorney general.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, I am very, very pleased with a lot of these nominations. Tulsi Gabbard, I'm very pleased with. Robert Kennedy, Kash Patel at the FBI. All these places need a house cleaning, and they need someone to look and root out corruption and partisanship. And I don't want them to replace partisanship with our partisanship. I want them to remove partisanship. And so when I say that if the FBI is going after homeschoolers or Catholics or pro-life people, that needs to end. But it doesn't mean we turn around and we use the government to go after people protesting in favor of abortion. We get the government out of regulating and policing speech. Speech should be completely uninterrupted by the government. It's another thing we're going to investigate in our committee, and that is the idea that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security were meeting with Twitter. Now, Elon Musk revealed a lot of this through the Twitter files. Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, they've revealed a lot of the private side of this, but I think they've exposed some documents that when we receive these documents from government, when we can see the internal emails going back and forth between the people in government who are wanting to regulate speech, I think there's going to be some shocking things revealed. But I believe that we will get that either through subpoena or also with the help of the new Trump administration.
We're totally ready for it. And then when it comes to like the waste, the fraud, the corruption, all that, you're famous for the Festivus report. And then also being like the only guy in the Senate that cares about this stuff. So are you going to be working with DOGE to try to, bring this stuff to light, to try to get, the fat cut? Are you going to be helping them?
Absolutely. And ultimately, it requires Congress. DOGE can do not a lot more than pointing out the waste. They don't have the actual power to reduce any waste. I'm there to try to cut the spending. But I'll give you an example of what we're up against. Some of the worst grants that you've seen, like one of the ones we exposed was, do lonely rats use more cocaine than rats who have lots of friends and have spouses and have a good social group? Do they use more cocaine? That was $400,000.
Wow.
$4.8 million spent studying or giving money to social media influencers in Ukraine.
My favorite was the ice skating drag queens.
Yeah,
That was a good one.
The bearded ladies quartet. You know, we got to pump that.
Yeah, totally.
But a lot of the crazy research, like Japanese quail, if you give them cocaine, are they more sexually promiscuous? Most of these, most of these studies come from the National Science Foundation. So not only have I been pointing the National Science Foundation out and their waste and their crazy research, this goes all the way back to the 1970s with William Proxmire doing it. But I'll give you an example of what we're up against and why this is a difficult project and not so easy. A year ago, Republicans with Democrats put forward a bill called the CHIPS Act. This was to subsidize giant manufacturers of microchips, Intel, companies from Taiwan, companies from around the world, and we were going to subsidize them. But in the same bill, they doubled the size of the National Science Foundation. So my point is, you won't get less waste. It's not like we can appoint someone to work at the National Science Foundation who's going to root out waste. You have to give them less money. If you give them twice as much money, you'll get twice as much crazy research.
Totally.
And so this passed with every Democrat vote and half the Republicans. Do you see what I'm up against? When I vote against these spending proposals, against explosion of spending, it requires people in the Senate and Congress. So what happens is there are battles every year. There are battles in primaries, and people have to send more conservative Republicans. There are no conservative Democrats left. William Proxmire was one in the 1970s. They're gone. There was a dying breed, but they've died off. It's only Republicans that will care. But unfortunately, we're at about half in the Senate. And it's about the same in the House. Look, in the House, they end up passing that $200 billion for Ukraine. Mike Johnson went along with it. He was supposed to be a conservative, and he got rolled and co-opted. So the battle isn't over, and people probably who listen to your podcast are activists and people who want to say and need to get involved and say, you can't keep sending the same people back here.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. You're pegging our audience just exactly right. That's what they care about. They care about how much spending there is on stupid crap that nobody wants this money spent on. Although I do worry that the three of us are underestimating the importance of coked out quails.
Right.
It's possible.
I mean, it's
You just don't know.
and
how
ice
important
skating
they are.
drag queens. I mean, I
That's
don't.
exactly right.
That's true. Possibly.
Well, we
Or-
want to be
or taking-
respectful.
Or policing the border in Paraguay.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yes.
I think people are concerned about the border, but they just soon we spend money on our border before we start sending money to the border of Ukraine or the border of Paraguay.
You think? Yeah. Exactly.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time, Senator Paul. We appreciate it. We know you're on a time schedule. And so thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah. Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. Thanks for having me.